course overview for Creative Writing 305, author and book marketing. I'm your instructor, Claire Barker, and let's get started. So first things first, one of those little addendums, I was notified that some of you will get a book with the date of 2023, and most of us will get a book with the date of 2022. So if you find yourself wondering as you get to the textbooks what is going on with those dates, please know that you have caught it. It is correct that there are two different dates for that publication. So when I get in a moment to, let me show that slide. Oh, I don't have it right here. When we get to the session overviews for each week and we look at what we're doing in that session, we will note that one of the books is from 2022 and it will say that on the syllabus. It will say that in lots of places. And then you will find yourself looking at a book that says it's 2023. So please know that, yes, you've caught that. And you are right, it is different and that it's perfectly okay. So use the date that is in your book when you are working on that, or use the 2022 date. That is fine as well. They are the same works. They just have two different dates on them. So what are we doing in our course? Today I want to look at the course objectives, the assignments that we have, a note on author websites, and then our aims with all of this. Because I feel like all of these go together. A lot of times we sort of disassociate things like course objectives from the assignments themselves, from what we want to accomplish in a class. And, apologies for sounds. I want you to see all of that as a connected element. So first things first, course objectives and the student learning outcomes. In our objectives, we're doing things like looking at an online platform. And we say introduce, but a lot of you, as you're going to see with other notes that I make in this chat, are things that you have already started to do. You may already have an online platform. Well, what we want to look at next is best practices for building that platform. So we're going to look at our platform and what we're doing and share that with each other, but we're also going to look at other people. We're going to say what are our favorite authors doing? How are they succeeding at this? And hopefully gain some great insights from what each other person loves to look at and what they are finding exciting and connecting. We want to talk about things like the book launch timeline and all the kinds of things that are involved there. So we're actually going to have more than one assignment about the book launch, about marketing. So we're going to look at plans for that. Not necessarily that you would have to do all of these things yourself, you may, but so that you are also aware of all those things. I like to look at a lot of what we do in these courses as the chance to say, is that something I feel I could learn about and comfortably do, or is that something where I recognize that my skills are not in that area and that I'm not comfortable? And at the very least, we've learned that, and hopefully we've also learned how to guide that process and how to interact well with it. We're also looking at what is behind those marketing ideas. Why do we need something to be marketed? You often see little links on social media of, did you notice an ad for XYZ? I have to admit, I almost never can answer yes because I don't pay attention to that. So that's a marketing fail. We want to introduce ways to grow your platform, and we want to promote the highest image of God above the author image. How can we bring that together? How can we show that that's our purpose and our aim? And finally, we want to introduce the world of marketing and the concepts behind marketing strategies. There are entire degrees in marketing. There are people with degrees in it doing this as their full-time job. So obviously it's a big field, but there are lots of little pieces that we can do ourselves and that we can be aware of as we tackle it. So to get there, we want to do things like consider the voice awarded to our career through what our online platform is doing. And we're going to talk about that in session 1 especially. Like, what kind of voice do we want to have, and what are we comfortable sharing about ourselves as we do this process? And I want to share some authors with you who have hidden themselves or who aren't comfortable with the image that was presented, so that you can sort of see what you may want to do. We want to demonstrate best practices relating to building that platform. There are lots of bits and pieces, and we all have different online skills, so we want to tap into those and all gain growth. We want to plan that book launch so that we get strong ideas on what it could look like if we do it ourselves, or how we would support someone doing it for us, identifying our target audience and competition. So there are other people, when you say, oh, it's kind of like this person's work, well, that also makes them competition. How are you going to connect with that and grow with that? We want to create an actionable, sustainable plan to grow that author platform, because it's hard to get out there every day and engage on social media. I've definitely seen other accounts grow in ways that mine hasn't because I am not consistent, and consistency and things like that are really important. But there are lots of tools that we can do to get in there. We want to develop our writer image, which is a big part of this. Like, who do we want to be online. It doesn't necessarily have to be our full selves, and I want to bring up different authors throughout our time together to look at how people do that, and that it's perfectly okay not to share all of ourselves without compromising our view of God's image. And finally, we want to implement the most appropriate marketing strategy. So it's our chance to say, how could we look through all of these and figure out what suits us best? So all of our assignments are geared toward these ideas. How can we connect with these ideas, learn what's out there, learn what steps to start taking, and increase them? And there are definitely things that you've already done in other classes that we can build upon as well. So that's my aim as well, that we build upon what we know. Next, our calendar. So as you can tell, we have discussions each week and submitted assignments each week, but we have things like the marketing plan stage 1 here in session 1, and then we have marketing plan stage 2 and our final reflection in session 5. So when we get to that, you'll see that there's a big yellow sign in it that says stop here for stage 1. We're going to grow and increase our knowledge before we go on with it. There are also lots of things you've seen in other classes. So again, I want you to be thinking about how you can take what you have learned, that process that you considered, the effort you put into that, and start to grow from that. So a book cover, an author website, how to interact and engage with these platforms, with social media platforms and things like that. They're not brand new things necessarily, but we're all talking about it and seeing how we've had good engagement and what has and hasn't worked for us so that we can grow with that. My personal page is so tiny compared to my Bulldog social media. But I definitely put a lot more effort into that, a lot more images, a lot more work in telling their story. And I think that's a really interesting thing to consider, that my own personal persona I haven't developed in that sense. That's what we're looking at. How are we developing those, and how far do we want to take that? So to that end, I wanted to pull out some key elements. I wanted you to know that I really mean this. Author website. You got one? Okay, awesome. If so, use our topic, our points, to evaluate and refresh your site. Consider looking at like maybe 2 authors and really deep diving. When we ask, what's your author about me page look like? What is your blog post? What does this look like? What does that look like? Go look up that on 2 authors you really like, 1 or 2 authors, and say, what are they doing that I want to take? And increase and grow your work. So I hope that you'll start where you are, take what you have and really grow it, because it's a great opportunity to build. It's that idea of revision. We don't just write our entire work in a draft. That could happen. That's very exciting when that happens. But most of the time we have drafts, we have revisions, we are editing. That's the whole process, right? We've done copy editing. Like, there's so much going on behind the scenes. Same thing here with our website. We are growing with it. So what do we want to do with all this kind of stuff? I'm going to talk about this a couple of different times in a couple of places, but I wanted to bring up 3 concepts. 1, some authors use pseudonyms. So go out there and do some searches and see if you can find some people who maybe don't share who they are. I'll talk about these more in our course overview for session 1 overview. And authors don't always love what happens with their writing. I would imagine it's the same with musicians as well, where everyone wants to hear that song. And after 20 or 30 years of performing the same song, they don't really want to sing it anymore. But we, as the audience, still want to hear it. And that has absolutely happened to different authors. And some authors have a complicated relationship with their work, where they sort of don't want to be seen behind it. They want that work to be by itself. So that's what I want you to be thinking about. Who do you want to present yourself as? You do not have to share all of yourself. When you're out there sharing who you are as an author, you can say, I have a family, and not talk about them. You can not mention family at all. You can talk about everyone in your family and make a strong connection there. That's up to you. There's a lot of space. I'm using that as one example of how there are layers to that, and it's perfectly appropriate to pick which layer you want to have. Next, here are some questions, and I would hope that you would add some to it as well. Who we are and how we perceive our work can be really complicated. What we want it to be, what we hope it to be, what we want to share. One of my favorite authors to talk about in that sense is Tim O'Brien, who writes fiction and nonfiction. And in his fiction, he has a character named Tim O'Brien. And there is this overlapping and this interconnectivity that is really complicated and complex for really good reasons. We may not want others to compare our lives with our characters. sometimes we want to step aside from that. We don't really want people thinking about us. And I say characters in terms of fiction, but there's a space for that in nonfiction as well, where we don't want people saying, well, your life isn't that great, so why would I take your advice? We all have good insights that we need to share at different times. And sometimes it's going to be reflected very clearly in our lives, and other times it's something we are working very hard on, which is why we understand how important that information is and that insight is. So sometimes there are disconnects that we want to have there. We don't want people looking at us. We want them focusing on that work. And another final question for today: we may want our work to be its own thing and just not a part of us, not a reflection at all, disconnected from who we are. There are so many possibilities, and that's kind of part of what we're doing in this particular class. We're marketing our work. What does that mean about us? How are we marketing ourselves? What does that look like for us? What are we comfortable with? All of those spaces, all of those questions are things we should address, that we should explore together, because some of us are not going to want to be seen, and others are comfortable with that. And all of those possibilities are things that we should be considering as we look at how we're going to or are marketing ourselves and our work. So I can't wait to explore all of this with you, and I hope you're ready for lots of interesting assignments, and that you know how much I love questions and interactions with feedback. So please make sure you are always ready to ask a question and to say, clarify that, add more to it. I'm always trying to find that Goldilocks feedback that's not too much, not too little. That doesn't mean I succeed. Remember, Goldilocks tried like 3 times. She had to get there. So if it's a little too much or a little too little, don't hesitate to tell me. And I will see you out there in that course shell.